Hello, my name's Jason Hakin. I'm here today with a safeguarding team update, and today we're specifically focusing on domestic abuse and violence in respect of the current COVID-19 context and how that impacts on our practice and what we can do about it. So what we know is that global reports are that there's been an increased demand for specialist domestic abuse helplines and support. Victims have described being trapped with the abuser, and they've described an isolation from informal networks such as family and friends, but also from professional avenues of support in some cases, as services have adapted to a more socially distanced or remote way of connecting with them. There's been a massive economic impact of the pandemic on households, and that's placed a greater pressure on relationships as well. And when we consider lockdown pressures, these have often served as a catalyst for abuse. They haven't actually caused the abuse, but they've been the catalyst of that. And we've seen that when abuse has already been there and it's escalated, but also for abuse to begin in the first place. There's been widely reported increase in alcohol and substance misuse for some people during lockdown as well. Victims of domestic abuse have described that avenues of escape have been closed down to get away from abusive relationships when social restrictions are in place and lockdowns and so on. It's all the harder to escape from that kind of abuse. Victims have described an increase in the use of webcams and social media and so-called revenge porn as tools that abusers have used to threaten them and coerce them into doing the things that they want them to do. And they've also reported increased use of mobile phones as a means of monitoring their every move and exerting that coercive control over them. In the safeguarding team, then, we look at three things. We look at paying attention to the abuse, and we look at asking about it and finding out more. And then we consider what actions we can take as well. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to think about the attention. So we can be vigilant and notice when service users disclose troubling aspects of their relationships with you. And we can note the need, if you receive any disclosures, to see service users face to face, preferably outside of the home. If you can't do that and someone in your team can't do it either, then have a think about the team of professionals around that family or that person. Maybe someone like a health visitor or a family support worker or a GP is better placed than you are to have the conversation. Notice if a service user or family member is being made to be subordinate and isolated, and find out about changes in circumstances and partners which could indicate vulnerability. Be accurate in recording of family demographics and use the children and siblings form on Rio. Accurately record the names and details of partners. And an example of this would be not just recording them in the first place, but in your progress notes, making sure that we're not just referring to husbands or partners or ex-partners and so on. We're actually using the names so that it's easier to track and see where those risks may be coming from. Understand that children in the home where domestic abuse is occurring are actually experiencing a kind of child abuse, and be mindful that domestic abuse occurs in all age groups and often in long established relationships. Understand that often people experiencing mental health issues are experiencing them because of the long-term effect of domestic abuse that they've been victims of, or perhaps they've been singled out as being vulnerable because of their mental health issues by a perpetrator. Know that victims of domestic abuse may not immediately recognise their experience as abusive. We often hear of cases of people suffering domestic abuse who are actually going back to partners who are abusive and so on. We're very aware in the safeguarding team of the process that is often necessary. So please don't despair when this happens, and please do stick with the conversations and thinking about those safeguarding actions that can be taken. So we move to asking then. Take time to ask about significant relationships in service users' lives, but only do that when you're absolutely sure the service user is actually alone. The last thing that you'd want to do is place that service user in increased risk by discussing their relationship or any possible abuse that they're experiencing within earshot of somebody who might be abusing them. It's particularly important, of course, if you are connecting with them remotely, because you can't always see who else is in the room. Ask about a person's relationship history if possible, as that may indicate potential vulnerabilities, and use a combination of soft or open questions as well as direct questions as and when required. Just to let you know, we will produce some example questions which aren't a formulaic response, but we will put those onto our COVID-19 page, and there will be an accompaniment to this webinar. Ensure that asking about a service user's relationship is an ongoing process and not just a one-off. And find out what the victim wants to happen. Don't just assume what it is they want. Listen to their own assessment of the risk that they're experiencing and establish how they're keeping themselves and any children they have safe from harm. So taking actions then. Consider the support package any potential victim is receiving and consider reviewing that with your MDT and having the discussion, posing the question whether the package that is in place is sufficient in the light of the concerns that you may have. Discuss with your line manager as well if appropriate, and give information and signposting to specialist avenues of support for victims of domestic abuse. And again, we'll post some links and useful organisations that you can use for this on our COVID-19 page alongside this webinar. Always ensure that we see service users alone in the first instance and make safeguarding personal by finding out what it is a victim wants. Listen to victims who will often be expert at managing the risk of the abuse they're experiencing. Consider completing a DASH assessment over a few sessions if necessary with the victim and referring to MARAC. And just so that you're aware, we'll put some information alongside this webinar on our COVID page that explains a little bit more about those processes and how they might be useful to you and the person that you're working with. Take safeguarding action in the best interests of any children where appropriate, and where there's imminent risk of significant harm, do please dial 999. If you've discussed with your line manager and your MDT and you'd like further advice and support, then please come to us at the safeguarding team. And finally, and above all, don't do nothing. Safeguarding really is everybody's business. Thanks for your time today. Bye-bye.